The warning lights inside the small transport shuttle turned red all at once. Ani grabbed her daughter and pulled her close as the ship began to shake. The engines made a terrible sound, like metal being torn apart, and then everything went quiet for just a moment before they started to fall. "Mama!" Little screamed, her golden eyes wide with fear. "Hold on to me," Ani said, wrapping her thin arms around her child. "Do not let go." Through the cracked window of the shuttle, Ani could see nothing but white. Snow and ice stretched in every direction, and they were falling toward it at a speed that would certainly kill them. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer to the old gods of her people, asking them to protect her daughter if they could not protect her. The crash came like thunder. The shuttle hit the frozen ground and broke apart. Ani felt herself thrown through the air, still holding against her chest. She hit something hard and then cold, and then everything went dark. When she opened her eyes again, she did not know how much time had passed. Minutes, perhaps, maybe longer. She was lying in snow, half of her body buried in the white powder. Her violet blood was dripping from a wound on her head, staining the ice beneath her in a small purple pool. She tried to move and pain shot through her entire body. But then she heard a small sound, a whimper, and she remembered. She gasped. Her daughter was still in her arms, still alive. The little girl was crying softly, her small body shaking from cold and fear. Ani pulled her closer and looked around at what remained of their shuttle. There was almost nothing left. Pieces of metal were scattered across the snow like broken toys. Smoke rose from some parts, but it was quickly disappearing in the freezing wind. The emergency beacon, the one thing that could have saved them, was crushed beneath a large piece of the engine. Ani tried to stand. It took her 3 attempts before she could get her legs beneath her. Every part of her body hurt, but she forced herself to ignore the pain. She had to move. She had to find shelter. If they stayed here, exposed to this terrible cold, they would both die. They were not built for places like this. Her people came from a warm world with gentle breezes and soft sunlight. Their bodies were made for comfort, not survival. Their skin was thin, their blood was slow to warm, and their hearts, both of them, beat at a pace that could not fight against such extreme temperatures. She looked down at. The child had stopped crying now. Her eyes were half closed and her breathing was becoming slow. This was a bad sign. Ani knew that when the body began to shut down, sleep came first, and after sleep came death. "No, my little star," Ani said, shaking her daughter gently. "You must stay awake. Look at Mama. Keep your eyes open." Blinked and looked up at her mother. "I am so cold, Mama." "I know, my love, I know." Ani removed her thermal cloak, the only protection she had against the wind, and wrapped it around her daughter instead. The cold hit her immediately, cutting through her thin clothing like 1,000 tiny knives. She gasped but did not take the cloak back. Needed it more. She began to walk. The snow was deep, sometimes reaching up to her knees, and each step was a struggle. The wind blew against her face, carrying ice that scratched her skin and made her eyes water. She did not know where she was going. There was no map, no direction, no sign of life anywhere. She simply walked because stopping meant giving up, and she could not give up, not while was still breathing. Hours passed. The twin suns of this unknown planet began to move lower in the sky, and Ani felt the temperature drop even further. She had not thought it possible for any place to be colder than it already was, but this world seemed determined to prove her wrong. Her legs had stopped hurting some time ago. They had stopped feeling anything at all. She looked down and saw that her feet had turned a dark shade of purple, almost black. Frostbite. The tissue was dying. Even if she survived this, she might never walk properly again. But that did not matter now. Nothing mattered except finding shelter. Had stopped moving in her arms. The child was still alive. Ani could feel her small hearts beating against her chest, but she was no longer responding when her mother spoke to her. Her golden eyes stared at nothing, and her body had become stiff and still. "Please," Ani whispered to no one, "please help us." There was no answer, only the wind. She walked until she could not walk anymore. Her legs gave out beneath her and she fell into the snow, still holding her daughter. She tried to get up, tried to force her body to move one more time, but there was nothing left. All of her strength was gone. She looked around and saw a small opening in some rocks nearby. It was not much, just a narrow gap in the stone, but it would block the wind. She crawled toward it, pulling herself forward with her arms, dragging along with her. When she finally reached the rocks, she collapsed against them and pulled her daughter close. The wind could not reach them here, but the cold was still everywhere, surrounding them, pressing against them, trying to steal whatever warmth they had left. Ani knew that this was the end. No one knew they were here. No one was coming to save them. The rescue ships would search for weeks, maybe months, but they would never find this small, frozen planet at the edge of known space. She would die here, alone, forgotten. She began to sing. It was an old song, one that her own mother had sung to her when she was a child, a song about warmth and light and home. Her voice was weak and broken, barely louder than a whisper, but she sang anyway. She wanted the last thing her daughter heard to be something beautiful. The song ended. Ani pressed her lips against forehead and closed her eyes. "I am sorry, my little star," she said. "I am sorry I could not save you." She held her freezing child close and accepted death. And then, through the howling wind, she heard footsteps. Ani thought she was dreaming. The cold did strange things to the mind before death came. It made you see things that were not there, hear sounds that did not exist. Her mother had told her this when she was young, that freezing was a gentle way to die because the mind created beautiful lies to ease the passing. So when she heard the footsteps crunching through the snow, she did not believe they were real. She kept her eyes closed and held her daughter, waiting for the final moment to come. But the footsteps grew louder, closer, and then they stopped right in front of her. Ani opened her eyes. The figure standing before her was unlike anything she had ever seen. It was tall, much taller than any, with broad shoulders and thick limbs. It was covered in layers of strange material, heavy and insulated, and its face was hidden behind a hood that blocked the wind. For a moment, Ani felt fear. She had heard stories of hostile species that lived on frontier worlds, creatures that hunted other beings for food or sport. Perhaps this was one of them. Perhaps death would come faster than she had expected and more violently. But then the figure dropped to its knees in the snow beside her. It pulled back its hood, and she saw its face for the first time. It was a strange face, flat, with no scales and no fur. Its skin was smooth and had turned red from the cold, and its eyes were small and round, a pale blue color that reminded her of ice. There were patches of short hair on its chin and above its lips, a trait she had never seen on any species before. The creature opened its mouth and spoke. Ani did not understand the words. The sounds were deep and rough, nothing like the musical tones of the language. But there was something in the voice that surprised her. It was not angry or threatening. It sounded worried, urgent, almost desperate. The creature reached toward and Ani hissed. It was a weak sound, barely louder than a breath, but it was all the warning she could give. Even now, even at the edge of death, she would not let anyone take her daughter. The creature stopped immediately. It pulled its hands back and held them up, open and empty, showing that it meant no harm. Then it did something that Ani did not expect. It placed both of its hands over its own chest, pressing them against where its heart would be. Then it pointed at and made the same gesture. It pointed toward the direction it had come from, somewhere beyond the rocks and the endless snow. Then it repeated everything again, slower this time, its eyes locked on Ani's face. She understood. The creature was trying to tell her something. It wanted to help. It wanted to take them somewhere safe. But could she trust it? She knew nothing about this being. She did not know its species, its intentions, its nature. For all she knew, it could be leading them to something worse than death. She looked down at. Her daughter's eyes were closed now, and her breathing had become so shallow that Ani could barely feel it. The child's skin had lost all color, turning from its natural lavender to a pale, sickly gray. She was dying. Right here, right now, her little star was fading away. Ani had no choice. She loosened her grip on her daughter and held the child out toward the creature. The creature moved quickly but gently. It took into its arms and immediately began to remove its outer coat, the thick layer of insulated material that protected it from the cold. Ani wanted to stop it, wanted to ask what it was doing, but she could not find the strength to speak. The creature wrapped its coat around, covering her completely. Then it did something that shocked Ani more than anything else. It opened the front of its inner clothing and pressed against its bare chest, holding the child directly against its skin. Ani gasped. She could feel heat coming from the creature, actual warmth radiating from its body like a small sun. Its skin was impossibly hot compared to her own, burning with an internal fire that seemed to fight against the cold all by itself. What kind of being was this? What species could generate such warmth from within? The creature looked at Ani and spoke again. She still did not understand the words, but the meaning was clear. It reached down with its free arm and lifted her from the snow, pulling her up as if she weighed nothing at all. She should have been too heavy. Even among she was not a small person, and the creature was already carrying. But it held them both with ease, one in each arm, and began to walk back the way it had come. The wind howled around them as they moved through the storm. Snow flew in every direction, making it impossible to see more than a few steps ahead. But the creature did not slow down. It walked with purpose, with confidence, as if it knew exactly where it was going and nothing would stop it from getting there. Ani drifted in and out of consciousness. Sometimes she was aware of the movement, the rhythm of the creature's footsteps crunching through the snow. Other times she was somewhere else entirely, lost in memories of warmth and light in her home world, so far away now that it might as well have been a dream. But each time she woke, she saw the same thing. The creature was still moving, still carrying them, still holding close to its chest, sharing its impossible warmth with her dying daughter. And she noticed something else. The creature was shaking. Without its outer coat, the cold was attacking it too. Its skin had turned from red to white in places, and its breath came out in short, painful bursts. It was suffering. It was hurting. It was sacrificing its own protection to save a child it had never met. Why? Why would any being do such a thing? Ani tried to speak, tried to ask the question that burned inside her mind, but no words came out. Her throat was too dry, too frozen, too weak. The creature looked down at her and said something. Its voice was tired now, strained with effort and pain, but there was still kindness in its eyes, still determination. It adjusted its grip on her and kept walking. Time lost all meaning. Ani did not know how long they traveled through the storm. It could have been minutes or hours or days. All she knew was that the creature never stopped, never rested, never put them down. It carried them through the frozen hell of this nameless planet with a strength and endurance that should have been impossible. And finally, when Ani had given up all hope once again, she saw lights in the distance. The lights grew brighter as they approached. Ani could see now that they came from a small building, a metal structure that sat alone in the endless white landscape. Smoke rose from a pipe on its roof, and the windows glowed with a soft yellow light that promised warmth and safety. The creature carried them to the door and kicked it open with its foot. A wave of heat hit Ani's face, so sudden and so powerful that it almost hurt. She gasped as the warmth surrounded her, entering her lungs with each breath, pressing against her frozen skin like a gentle embrace. The inside of the building was simple but organized. There were machines and screens along the walls, storage containers stacked in corners, and a small sleeping area with a bed and blankets. It was a research station of some kind, Ani realized. The creature was a scientist, living alone on this frozen world to study something she could not begin to understand. The creature laid her down on the bed and covered her with blankets. Then it turned its attention to, moving quickly and efficiently, as if it had done this many times before. It placed on a table near the center of the room and unwrapped her from the coat. The child was motionless, her body still and gray, and for a terrible moment Ani thought she was already dead. But then the creature pressed its fingers against its neck and made a sound of relief. There was still a heartbeat, faint but present. The creature began to work. It retrieved supplies from various containers around the room, moving with a speed that seemed impossible for someone who had just walked through a deadly storm while carrying 2 passengers. It wrapped in special blankets that seemed to generate their own heat. It placed warm packs around her body, focusing on her chest and her stomach where her 2 small hearts struggled to keep beating. It rubbed her arms and legs with gentle hands, trying to bring blood back to the frozen tissue. Ani watched all of this through half-open eyes. She wanted to help, wanted to be beside her daughter, but her body refused to move. The warmth of the room was doing something to her, making her feel heavy and tired in a way that was different from the exhaustion of the cold. Her body was trying to heal, trying to repair the damage that had been done, and it needed rest to do so. But she could not sleep, not yet, not until she knew that would survive. The creature continued to work through the night. Hours passed and still it did not rest. It checked on constantly, adjusting the warming packs, monitoring her breathing, speaking to her in its strange language as if the child could understand. And gradually, slowly, Ani began to see changes. Color returned to skin. Her breathing grew stronger, deeper, more regular. Her body began to move slightly, small twitches of her fingers and toes that showed life returning to limbs that had been nearly dead. And then, as the first light of the twin suns began to glow through the windows, opened her eyes. "Mama," she whispered. Ani tried to answer, but what came out was not words. It was a sound of pure relief, a sob that shook her entire body and brought tears streaming down her face. Her daughter was alive. Her little star was still shining. The creature heard the sound and turned around. When it saw that was awake, it smiled. It was a strange expression on its strange face, but Ani understood it immediately. It was happiness. Pure, simple happiness at seeing a child survive. The creature picked up a small device from one of the tables and did something to it. Then it spoke, and this time Ani understood the words. "She is strong," the creature said, its voice now translated into a language she could comprehend. "She will be okay." Ani stared at the creature in wonder. I can understand you now." "Translation device," the creature explained. "It took some time to analyze your language, but it is working now. My name is Daniel. I am a human." "Human," Ani repeated. She had never heard of this species before. "Where do you come from?" "A planet called Earth. It is very far from here." Daniel moved to check on again, adjusting the blankets around her small body. "I have been studying the ice formations on this world for almost 2 years. I was taking measurements outside when I saw your ship fall from the sky." "You saw us crash?" "Yes. I followed the smoke to find where you landed, but it took me a long time to reach you. The storm made travel very difficult." Daniel paused and looked at Ani with concern in his pale eyes. "You are lucky to be alive. A few more minutes in that cold and your daughter would not have survived." Ani thought about those final moments, when she had given up all hope and accepted that death was coming for them both. If Daniel had arrived just a little later, if he had walked just a little slower, would be gone forever. "Why?" she asked. The question had been burning inside her since the moment she first saw him. "Why did you help us?" Daniel seemed confused by the question. "What do you mean?" "You did not know us. You had no reason to risk yourself for strangers, and you did risk yourself. I saw you shaking in the cold. You gave your coat to my daughter and nearly froze yourself in the process. Why would you do such a thing?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. He seemed to be thinking about how to answer, as if the question had never occurred to him before. "Because you needed help," he finally said, "and I was there." Ani waited for more, but Daniel said nothing else. He simply shrugged, as if what he had done was the most normal thing in the universe, and went back to checking on. She did not understand. There were rules about such things. You helped your family, your friends, your community, but strangers, beings from another species entirely. The risk was too great, the reward too uncertain. Logic said that you should protect yourself first, ensure your own survival before worrying about others. But this human had ignored all logic. He had thrown away his protection, walked through a deadly storm, and nearly died himself to save two people he had never met and would probably never see again. What kind of species did such things? Ani reached out and took Daniel's hand. It was warm, so wonderfully warm, and she held it tightly as tears continued to fall down her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving my daughter." Daniel squeezed her hand gently and smiled again. "Rest now," he said. "You both need to recover. There will be time to talk later." Ani closed her eyes and let the warmth of the room carry her into sleep. For the first time since the crash, she felt safe. The days that followed were slow and quiet. Ani and remained in Daniel's research station, recovering from their ordeal while the storms continued to rage outside. The human had only one bed, so he gave it to them and slept on the floor near the heating unit, wrapped in a thin blanket that looked far less comfortable than what he had provided for his guests. Ani had objected to this arrangement at first. "You have done enough for us," she said. "We cannot take your bed as well." But Daniel had simply shaken his head. "You are still healing, needs a proper place to sleep. I have slept in worse conditions than this, believe me." And that was the end of the discussion. Ani was learning that humans were stubborn creatures when they had decided something. Arguing with Daniel was like arguing with a stone wall. He would listen politely, consider her words carefully, and then do exactly what he had planned to do in the first place. But he was also kind. Incredibly, impossibly kind in ways that continued to surprise her. He cooked meals for them using supplies from his storage containers. The food was strange, different from anything Ani had ever tasted, but it was warm and filling and gave them strength. He made sure had the biggest portions, insisting that growing children needed more nutrition than adults. When Ani pointed out that he was eating less than both of them, he simply shrugged and said he was not very hungry. He spent hours entertaining while Ani rested. The translation device allowed them to communicate, and the little girl had an endless supply of questions about everything she saw. What did this machine do? What were those lights for? Why did humans have such flat faces? Daniel answered every question with patience and humor, never once becoming annoyed or frustrated by the child's curiosity. "You are good with children," Ani said one evening, watching Daniel teach how to play a simple game with small colored stones. Daniel looked up and smiled sadly. "I have a niece back on Earth. She is about the same age as. I have not seen her in almost 3 years now." "Do you miss your home?" "Every day." Daniel placed another stone on the table, letting win the game. "But the work here is important. Someone had to do it, and my family understands that some things are bigger than ourselves." Ani thought about this for a long time after Daniel had gone to sleep that night. She thought about the kind of person who would leave behind everything they loved to spend years alone on a frozen planet. She thought about the kind of species that would produce such individuals, beings who believed so strongly in something that they would sacrifice their own comfort and happiness to achieve it. And she thought about what Daniel had done for them. A stranger had fallen from the sky, a creature he had never seen before, and he had not hesitated for a moment. He had walked into a deadly storm, given up his only protection, and carried 2 aliens to safety while his own body suffered from the cold. This was not normal behavior. Among the species Ani knew, among the civilizations she had encountered in her travels across the galaxy, self-preservation was the first and most important law of survival. You protected yourself. You protected your family. Everything else was secondary. But humans seemed to follow a different law. A law that said helping others was just as important as helping yourself. A law that said kindness was not weakness, but strength. As the days passed, Ani learned more about this strange species called humanity. She learned that they came from a world of incredible variety, with environments ranging from frozen wastelands to burning deserts to vast oceans of water. She learned that they had evolved to survive in almost any condition, adapting to challenges that would destroy most other species. She learned that they were warm-blooded in a way that went beyond most galactic life. Their bodies generated heat constantly, burning energy to maintain an internal temperature that would be considered a dangerous fever for them. This was why Daniel had been able to keep alive during that terrible walk through the storm. His body was a furnace, pushing back against the cold with a biological fire that never stopped burning. She learned that humans were strong, far stronger than their soft appearance suggested. They had evolved on a planet with heavy gravity, and their muscles and bones had developed to match. Daniel could lift weights that would crush her, could walk distances that would exhaust any of her people, could endure pain and hardship that would have killed her long before it killed him. But most importantly, she learned that humans had something else, something that could not be measured in temperature or strength, something that lived in their hearts rather than their bodies. They had compassion. On the 12th day after the crash, Daniel's communication equipment finally managed to send a signal through the storm. A trade ship was passing through a nearby system, and they had received the distress call. Rescue was coming. Ani felt joy and sadness mixed together in equal parts. She was grateful that she and would finally be able to go home, to return to their people and their warm world. But she also knew that she would miss this small research station and the human who had saved their lives. "What will you do when we are gone?" she asked Daniel as they waited for the rescue ship to arrive. "The same thing I have always done," Daniel replied. "Continue my research, study the ice, wait for my replacement to arrive in another year or so." "You will be alone again." Daniel nodded. "Yes, but I am used to it now." Ani looked at him, at this strange creature with his flat face and his warm body and his impossibly kind heart. She wanted to say something important, something that would express everything she felt, but she could not find the right words. Instead, she simply reached out and took his hand again, holding it tightly as they watched the rescue ship descend through the clouds. "I will never forget what you did for us," she said. "My people will know your name, Daniel. They will know what humans are." Daniel smiled, but there was something in his eyes that suggested he did not quite understand why this mattered so much. He was about to find out. The great chamber of the Galactic Council was filled with representatives from 100 different species. They sat in curved rows that rose up toward a domed ceiling painted with stars, each delegation wearing the colors and symbols of their. This was the most powerful gathering in known space, the place where the future of civilizations was decided. Ani had never imagined she would stand before such an assembly. She was not a politician or a diplomat. She was simply a mother who had been traveling with her daughter when disaster struck. But word of her story had spread quickly after her rescue, passing from ship to ship and world to world until it reached the ears of the council itself. They wanted to hear about the human. "Tell us what happened," the High Speaker said. She was an ancient creature, her scales faded with age but her eyes still sharp with intelligence. "Tell us everything." So Ani told them. She described the crash, the desperate walk through the snow, the moment when she had given up hope and accepted death. She described the stranger who had appeared from the storm, the way he had given up his protection to save a child he had never met, the way he had carried them both through the frozen hell without stopping or resting. The council listened in silence. When she finished, they exchanged glances with each other, murmuring in languages she did not understand. "This human," the High Speaker said, Daniel, you say he risked his own life to save yours. Yes. And you were strangers to him. He had no obligation, no debt, no reason to help you. None. He simply saw that we were in danger and decided to act. The high speaker leaned back in her chair, her ancient face showing something that might have been surprise. We have encountered humans before in small numbers. They are a young species, still confined mostly to their home system. We did not think them capable of such actions. I did not think any species was capable of such actions, Ani replied. Among my people we help those we know, family, friends, community, but strangers, beings from another world entirely. The risk would be considered too great. A representative from a species Ani did not recognize spoke up. His voice was deep and mechanical, translated through a device similar to the one Daniel had used. Perhaps this human was unusual, an exception to his kind. We should not judge an entire species by the actions of one individual. Ani shook her head. I thought the same thing at first, so I asked Daniel about it during my recovery. I asked if other humans would have done what he did. And what was his response? He said he did not understand the question. To him, helping someone in danger was simply what you did. It was not special or unusual. It was normal. The council fell silent again. Ani could see them struggling to understand, their minds working to fit this information into their understanding of how the galaxy worked. She knew the feeling. She had struggled with it herself for many days. We have studied many species, the high speaker finally said. We have seen civilizations rise and fall across thousands of years, and in all that time, we have learned one truth above all others. Survival requires selfishness. The species that protect themselves first are the species that survive. Those who sacrifice themselves for strangers do not last long in the universe. And yet humans have survived, Ani said. Their planet has harsh environments, dangerous predators, countless challenges that should have destroyed them. But they are still here. They are growing. They are spreading beyond their home system. How is this possible? Another representative asked. If they truly behave as you describe, they should have been extinct long ago. Ani thought about Daniel, about the warmth of his hands and the kindness in his eyes. She thought about what he had told her during those long days in his research station, about human history and human nature, and the things that made his species unique. Because they help each other, she said. When disaster strikes, they do not abandon the weak, they carry them. When danger comes, they do not flee alone, they stand together. They have survived not despite their compassion, but because of it. The high speaker was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something that surprised everyone in the chamber. She laughed. Remarkable, she said. Absolutely remarkable. A species that has turned kindness into a survival strategy. We have never seen anything like it. At that moment, the doors of the chamber opened, and Daniel walked in. He looked uncomfortable in the formal clothing he had been given, and his eyes moved nervously around the vast room filled with alien faces. Ani had asked the council to bring him here, to speak for himself about what he had done. She wanted them to see him, to hear him, to understand that he was not some strange exception, but a representation of his entire species. Daniel stood before the council, small and alone, surrounded by beings far older and more powerful than himself. The representative has told us about your actions, the high speaker said. She claims that you risked your life to save strangers, that you nearly died in the process. Is this true? Daniel nodded, yes. Why? The same question Ani had asked him, the question that had confused him before. But this time, standing before the most powerful assembly in the galaxy, Daniel seemed to think about his answer more carefully. Because when I saw them in the snow, he said, I did not see strangers. I did not see aliens. I saw a mother holding her child, trying to protect her from the cold. And I knew that if I walked away, if I left them there to die, I would never be able to live with myself. He paused, looking around at the assembled representatives. "I do not know if other species would understand this," he continued. "But for humans, there are some things more important than survival: honor, compassion, the knowledge that you did the right thing when it mattered most. These are the things that make life worth living. Without them, survival means nothing." The council was silent. Every eye in the chamber was fixed on the small human standing alone in the center of the floor. Finally, the High Speaker spoke. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "we have underestimated your species, human. Perhaps you have something to teach us after all." Daniel shrugged, that same simple gesture Ani had seen so many times before. "We are just humans," he said. "This is what we do." And in that moment, Ani knew that the galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again.